Okay, it's 12:02, so I think we'll make a start and hopefully a few more people will trickle in. Welcome everybody to the first of these Wessex Museum's Lunchtime Shares. I'm Christina Broughton, I'm CEO of Wessex Museums. I'm a white middle-aged woman with long blonde hair and I'm wearing a white shirt with black swans on it today. I'd like to welcome you today. The Lunchtime Shares programme has been devised by Wessex Museums as an opportunity to share and learn from the work that goes on in the partner museums and across the partnership. And whilst these sessions are designed for colleagues in the Wessex Museums partnership, as part of our wider advocacy and sector support role, we'll also be sharing the Lunchtime Shares presentations on our YouTube channel so that our colleagues from across the sector can access and benefit from these talks. I've got a couple of housekeeping slides just to share with you before we start the talk today. So please do keep yourselves muted and your cameras off during the talk. You're welcome to turn your camera on during the Q&A and it would be lovely to see you. And of course, unmute at that time if you'd wish to ask a question. We have closed captions available to you. If you'd like to turn them on, you can do that by going to More and selecting Language and Speech and then Show Live Captions. Please, during the talk, as questions come to mind, use the chat function to ask those questions. We're going to have about 15 minutes at the end of the talk for a Q&A session. So I'll be collating all your questions in the chat as we go, and we'll pose those to our speaker at the end of the session. Of course, if you have a question that comes to mind during the talk and you'd like to raise it yourself during the Q&A, please just pop your hand up and then you can unmic and ask the question yourself. Please also use the chat function if you have any technical issues during the talk. Claire is here in the background running our tech today, so she'll be able to help you if you direct your message to her. So that's Claire Brown. And as always, we're really interested in your feedback after the event so that we can shape this program so it's the most benefit to you. So you will receive a link to a short survey, and it is very short. I think it's about 3 questions. Claire, I'll put a link in the chat at the end of the session, and it'll also be emailed to you afterwards. So please, please do just take literally 2 minutes to answer the questions and provide your feedback. Okay. Well, it's time for me to introduce our speaker today. So welcome to John Wood, who is Collections and Exhibitions Manager at Swindon Museums. So John has been at Swindon Museums since 2021 and has overseen recently the process to relocate and redisplay Museum Art Swindon from its old venue to a new one in Euclid Street. So previously he worked at the Aston Martin Museum in Oxfordshire and spent a decade with the National Trust managing collections, conservation and operations at several historic sites. So he knows what he's talking about. So John, welcome. Over to you.
Thank you, Christina. Yeah, so I'm John Wood. I'm the Collections and Exhibitions Manager for Swindon Museums. That covers Steam Museum, the Great Western Railway, Lydiard House Museum, and the museum in question today, Museum Art Swindon. Just for the audio description, I'm a white middle-aged man wearing glasses with a depressingly receding hairline and wearing a black polo. So I thought I'd start with where we were, what we had before. So we were at a site called Apsley House in another part of Swindon. It was a very small building. It was basically an old converted house, lots of steps. It wasn't at all accessible. There was a lift. It was from the 1960s, good lift that didn't work. So there was no public access beyond the ground floor. If you had mobility issues, there were some really odd displays. We were quite famous for our Gariel, which was just sat in the middle. It's not linked anyway to Swindon. We had a room of Egyptology. Again, strangely, the Egyptians have no link to Swindon. We had on display Hatimu, mummified child, which we bought from Devises Museum in the 20s. There was no structure or narrative to the public galleries at Apsley. And behind the scenes, we were basically bursting out of absolutely everywhere. So you can see the sort of top left image with lots of boxes. That was the back or part of the collections office, but it's also doubled as the photographic store. I mean, I'm almost depressed to show the art store, given how badly some of our really important art was stored. But again, we were bursting at the seams, stuff was double stacked. Basement with stuff on the floor, an outside garage with stuff on the floor. None of that is environmentally very good. There was an attic which was storage, but the access was through a hatch. I mean, it was not safe for collections and it wasn't safe for staff. I banged my head so many times going in and out of our various stores. So there had always been a plan to move out of Apsley. There'd been a plan to find a new museum site. For about 20 years, funding had been attempted through HLF and not got anywhere. It kept stalling. The building was falling down, largely because no investment was going into the building, because there'd always been a plan to move out. And so that was always the focus. And so we closed for lockdown, as everybody did. The decision was made, look, we're not going to open, when we get into social distancing, we couldn't reopen anyway because of the tight staircases and the spacing. So the decision was like, we're going to move out. This is the time. Whilst I'm not really going to talk about the packing up process, I should say the entire act of packing up the entire museum was done by the collections team. We got professional movers in to actually do the heavy lifting and the transport in the van, but largely all packing up was done by the team, my team, which was me as a full-time manager, a collections assistant who's part-time, and at that point we had 2 collections and exhibitions officers who were also both part-time and were also running our other 2 sites, still putting on exhibitions. So this had to be integrated. Everything we're talking about had to be integrated into our business as usual program. So what we got, and so we knew we were moving out, and we weren't quite sure where we were going to, and there was quite a lot of discussions. But the space that was resolved on was the first floor of the council civic building. So it's actually a beautiful building, built in the 1930s. It's slightly Art Deco-y. It is a listed building. On the ground floor is the big council chamber and the mayor's parlour, council leader's office, chief exec's office, the registry office are down there. But the first floor had been basically wasn't really being used post-COVID, and post the ongoing cuts to local authority meant that fewer people were working there generally, and a shift to hybrid working meant the office space really wasn't needed. So most of the space upstairs wasn't needed, and it was a nice big space and offered us far more opportunities than where we currently were. And so that's where we were moving to. You can sort of see on that plan, we divided the space up. So you've got the pink space in the middle, which is the reception shop, and we call our Origins Gallery. The orange side is our History of Swindon permanent galleries. And then we had 2.5, so 2 big temporary exhibition, changing exhibition spaces in the corner gallery. And the grey area at the back is our officing and storage. So it offered us a lot more than we'd had before, but it was an office. You can sort of see there, you know, these are photos I took when I was trying to work out and plan stuff going in. You know, rooms used for dumping for old office equipment, some officing still in place. It looked very municipal, and the budget we had for the whole of the project, including the building work, was only a few $100,000. It was basically about 600,000 because that was the estimate to fix Apsley House, and politically it was deemed that if we were going to move out of Apsley House, we couldn't spend more money than it would cost to fix the building we were in. Also, financially for the council, that's all the money there was. So that was our budget. And I say it had to cover not just the actual museum fit out, but the building work. And the building work, whilst we didn't do a lot of changes, we did take down some walls. There was a lot of negotiation about which walls we could take down because of the listed building status, checking original plans to find out what the original wall lines were. But the building work included putting in suspended ceilings to hide air conditioner units, putting in a lot of fire doors, and that was a massive cost we hadn't planned for. There was basically a change in regulation about the fire regulations sort of halfway through the project. So what had been a thought of, that's fine, the doors that were there could last, no, they had to be changed, and being listed building, they were all different. They all had to be made basically bespoke, which really increased costs. So of that sort of 600-ish thousand, there was about 60,000 from the project budget for what you'd think of as the museum fit out, the bits people are going to see. So we sunk lots of money into the stuff that nobody notices. Nobody notices the lighting really. They do notice the effect of it. Nobody notices the walls we've knocked out. Nobody notices the fire doors. The bits they were going to notice, we had minimal budget. We could use some of our operating budgets, our old operating budgets, but basically it was 60,000 and anything else we could scrimp from anywhere else. So how did we sort of value engineer ourselves to have a museum for a fraction of the cost that most people would ultimately want? The key word is realism. You know, as a team, we went around, we looked at some amazing sites, you know, going to somewhere like Dorset, absolutely fantastic new looking museum, lovely inbuilt cases, lovely GIS standard cases with graphic design at the back, bespoke mounts, and it was really clear early on, lovely though that would be, we just weren't going to be able to go anywhere near that. So the biggest cost was going to be display cases. So you can see close-ups there, those black display cases. So step one, that's for our own material in a space. So we didn't go to GIS standard. It would have been nice to. It's 8mm glass, not 11.5. They do seal, but they're not to the highest spec, but that makes them £1,500 each, as opposed to, you know, 2-3 times that for an equivalent in government indemnity standard. And we reuse cases. So on the top left picture, you can see the sort of creamy coloured display cases. Those are the ones we took out of Apsley House. The mobile ones, we flat packed them and got them transported, and we stored them for several years whilst we were in development. So really thinking around what do we need. We didn't say to the team developing it, you can't have cases, but we were really like, you've got to justify what you need. We did get some funding for the Arts Council, which is linked to a project called Unlocking Collections, which did support the purchase of some display cases, but most of those were for our temporary exhibition galleries, because that part of that project includes volunteers putting on exhibitions, including hopefully loans from other organisations. So we did manage to get government indemnity spec for our temporary spaces, so that when it comes to temporary exhibitions, we do have higher quality. The other way we were really practical about it, it was just, we're going to do everything. And I think that sort of realization that you're not going to be paying designers. There was no museum designer involved. We didn't come up with lovely concept mood boards or all these other things. It was going to be us. You know, you can see a room layout done on graph paper. You know, we haven't got CAD plans or anything else to play around with. You know, layouts of cases literally 1-to-1 scale in paper. All that planning was done by us. The way we approached the design, so standard font, or at least a free font, so no cost there. Free images as much as we could for our design, or sort of being cheeky in the, you know, sign up for Shutterstock and get 10 free images and then very quickly cancelling the free trial. Again, paints, all the paints were standard paint, not even Dulux, or even cheaper than that. And the collections team wrote all the text, came up with all the design concepts, basically did everything. and that's testament to the skill in the collections team we have, that this didn't phase them. They're quite used to putting on small scale exhibitions at our other sites, and we don't have a lot of funding for that, so we're always used to working in a limited budget anyway. So this wasn't that phasing for them, but this idea that we were going to have to come up with everything. The sort of biggest area of design was around our text panels. So this is our History of Swindon gallery text panels. We did start working with a designer, local designer, to come up with some of these. Actually, one of the boldest things we did was realizing it wasn't working, that relationship wasn't working, and what we were getting wasn't working, and so to cancel that design work, let that designer go and do it ourselves. And so what we came up with was these text boards, which are actually just painted MDF. This is an idea which I stole from Hardy, because the Hardy panels look really nice. So Hardy's Wessex touring exhibition, which opens at Swindon next month, as we're about to start installing it. Painted MDF to whatever color we wanted, which was really useful because we could pick colors that worked everywhere and sort of color match into everything else we were doing in the gallery. And then we found a local printer who could print directly onto the MDF board. I had volunteers cut the boards down to size. I had volunteers paint them. The actual printing of the text is about £12–13 per board. We were talking, there's 100+ boards, so it got expensive, but not super expensive. Then this idea that I then described as the exploded panel, where you've got the images which are on, they're just on Foamex, stuck on. Again, we just stuck them on with a spray mount. The labels are self-printed on our printers, sticky labels. What this has given us is a huge ability to be flexible. So we can go back, we can change a board if we need to, we can repaint it, we can take those images off, we can change images to a different image, we can change the labels and if we need to. The same is true for the labels in the cases. They're just printed on a printer here and backed onto card and put straight in, which again, I was changing text panels this morning, just adjusting stuff as you find new information, or somebody comes up with something you didn't know, or new objects going in. So it really gave us an opportunity to be flexible and to adapt what we were doing. You can also see they stand off the wall. Again, that was sort of necessity. You can sort of see on the top left image where there's a pipe running down, which runs down to the plug socket beneath. So they're all on standoffs that are away from the wall, deep enough to straddle all the different fittings that are around the rooms. But it's actually created a really amazing visual effect. We've had so many positive comments about the way these look. And I think what they have achieved is, because they are quite simple, they're also quite timeless. And one of the issues we had with the designs we were getting from our designer is I really felt they might start to date. The other thing I would say is you can see our timeline there. So again, our timeline was done by a member of my team in PowerPoint. So again, no design work. She's got an art background, but effectively she just did everything in PowerPoint. And again, we're getting so many positive comments about how good the timeline looks. And it is amazing what can be achieved with not a lot of good software, and just sort of skill and attention. And I should say the team that delivered this, they were still delivering at the other sites as well. We did stop some stuff. So we did stop doing certain tasks, particularly when it came to fit out. It was like, don't talk to us about the other stuff. We are spending all our time in Museum Art Swindon, but we were still delivering exhibitions at the other two sites. There was the day-to-day job. By this point there, we had been restructured. We had a few more members of staff, but we still only had myself as one full-time person, another full-time collections and exhibitions officer, two increased to 3 part-time collection exhibitions officer, increased just before the end of the project. and a part-time collections and exhibitions assistant. So not a huge team, but I'm so proud to say how skillful they were. This is the Origins gallery, so that one in the middle, which doubles as a shop. So a slightly different look to the gallery for this one. Origins looks at the history of the museum itself, which is a really useful way to talk about how our collection started, how it evolved. It's where we can tackle things like decolonization with some of our more questionable objects, and also gets to address things about what we collect now, and hopefully therefore might soften up people when we start to think about collections rationalization. We've highlighted some of the stuff we have in bulk that we don't really need, so hopefully it gets people to start thinking about what the museum does and how we approach the museum. But again, this is sort of a permanent exhibition, but you can see some of the artwork on the wall, which does go out on loan, so there is a need to change stuff around as we do loan to other venues. So the very simple block colours behind everything, which again we just did ourselves. We just masking taped the space we wanted. The only thing we did invest in was £20 in a laser level, so just projected laser lines on the wall. Oh my god, it was the best investment. It has revolutionized our lives, and makes hanging exhibitions so much quicker because it's really easy to get a dead straight line. But yeah, so we block painted ourselves. Again, the collection team did all of this. We put in you can see there's a hanging system, which again makes hanging and display really quick, but I put in every single rail that we hang off of. I'm comfortable with a drill and happy to go up a ladder, and so I got it how many days I did it sort of, you know, if I had an hour spare at the end of the day, I would be putting up a couple more sections. So I don't know how long it would took me in total, but it was things like that of just going, if I pay somebody to come in, it's going to cost me X amount. I'm here every day, I'm paid to be in. I'll just get on and do it. Near the end, there were a few things which we had to discussion around, which is, you know, boarding up the windows in our temporary exhibition spaces, which blocked out light, which is really important. And a conversation between me and the museum manager was like, I can do this, but it's going to take me this amount of time to do it. Are we happy that that's the impact on everything else I've got to do, and or that might delay opening? And so therefore at the end there was a few things like we'd get this done, and therefore we went, okay, we'll just get somebody else to do it. But by and large everything was done in-house. So my sort of conclusions, the lessons that we've learned from doing it. I would say the biggest lesson that we knew but have really been hammered home to me is my team, and I'm sure it's the same for everybody listening, your team has immense skill. You are museum professionals. You know what looks good. How many times do you look at an exhibition design and go, oh, it'd be better if that was over to the right a bit or up a bit? Well, man, that would be, you know, how much do you actually design it yourself in your head and then get a designer to come in, and all they can do is they have access to the whizzy design software that you don't have. And actually now there's a lot of whizzy design software for free or relatively cheap online. We started using a program called Canva online. We do pay for that for a corporate login, but it's like £5 a month for I think about 5 or 6 logins for the whole team, and we design everything on that. You know, also social media and everything. So yeah, we don't need Adobe to do all of this sort of very whizzy stuff. I would also say, and a little bit this is about skill, and obviously this is a bit that might vary for your own teams. But say I'm comfortable with DIY. None of the stuff I was doing was that difficult in terms of DIY. It's, can you use a screwdriver? Can you use a drill? Are you happy to hammer? Are you happy to paint? But I mean, I built large parts of this museum out of IKEA flat pack, using things like IKEA Kallax units, the big ones, the sort of cubbyhole things to make our temporary walls, which are also really useful because in a few places we've put perspex in rather than blanking off the sides with MDF, so they also therefore operate as really clever little display spaces as well. But yeah, you can categorically make a whole museum out of IKEA. I don't know why IKEA don't just supply one in a box. But yeah, really happy from in my point of view to just get on and build stuff, and I found that I quite liked having the control, but it meant you could go, right, it's going to come, it's going to be really easy to put together, and I'm comfortable doing that. Those aren't hard skills to learn, and actually it can save you a lot of money. Not saying it's going to save you time, but it's definitely going to save you money if you're capable of doing stuff like that yourself. The other really big thing is that idea of realism and or simplicity, although I wouldn't say that what we've come up with looks simple. It looks quite clean. It therefore looks quite timeless, which I think is a benefit. But as we knew we were going to have to do it all, we knew what our own internal skill base was, and we therefore cut our cloth accordingly. So, you know, we have what we have because we could do it. It looks really smart. I have sometimes wondered if we'd had the, you know, rather than the sort of 160 or so thousand that we have spent on all of this, say, including cases and stuff, it is about 160 we spent on the bits that the public see in the museum. If we'd had 10 times that, 100 times that, would it have looked 10 to 100 times better? And I think the answer is no. Yes, there would have been more whizzy bits. We might have had more, you know, technological interactives. We don't really have anything that plugs in, but then that's also really useful in terms of our energy usage and trying to think about ongoing running costs. I don't think we would have made it look that much better for a significantly larger investment, and I think we probably would have still made some of the same choices about the way it looked and the way we would approach things, because we wanted a design that we could keep adapting and keep on top of. And the problem, I think, with a lot of museum fit outs, and I've noticed it at, say, Steam Museum, which had a big HLF bid 25 years ago when they were building that, and it hasn't changed since because it's really difficult to change, because the actual installation of the interpretation and the cases, I think, are really hard. It hasn't changed, whereas we've come up with something that's, because we have ownership and we can change it, it is much easier to adapt, and therefore we can keep it fresher and keep moving stuff along. So actually, I think that ability for business as usual to keep on top of things and keep adapting things is a benefit. And I think if we just throw money at a museum designer, we would have got something that may have looked very different, but would we have felt we could change it as easily? So yeah, that's the end of the presentation. So if anybody's got questions.
Thank you, John. Really great presentation. It's a absolutely remarkable achievement for you and the team at Museum Art Swindon, and the pictures actually don't do it justice, I have to say. So thank you very much, and some really valuable lessons learned there. So